Welcome back to another LFG Thursday. Today, I'm joined with Kevin Mirko from Coin Metro. But before I give him an intro, I just wanted to give a quick update. It's Thursday. We have seen more interest in token generation lately, and that's going to be something that we talk about quite a bit with Token Go today. So instead of spending time on that, we've got a really good dynamic guest I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So instead of spending a lot of time kind of talking about what's going on as we're kind of ramping up towards end of year here, I'd like to just jump into it. So Kevin, if you wouldn't mind, it takes a couple minutes as our guests kind of join here, but if you wouldn't mind giving us an intro, the stage is all yours.
Sure. Thanks, Amir. I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite, by the way. And it is Thursday, so let's go. So my name's Kevin Mirko. I'm CEO at a company called Coin Metro. We are a centralized exchange. I know there's a lot of us. So rather than delving into, why we're different and all that stuff, what I would say is that we were one of the original supporters of Kadena back in the day, one of the first, if not the first centralized exchange to list Kadena. And we had a lot of gems in the back pocket back in the last bull run. And it served us well. And I think it served those communities well. And I'm here to talk about anything and everything crypto. So I know we got a few good topics. So rather than waste some more time on an intro, that's it for me. All I'll say, I guess, on top of it is I have a lot of experience in traditional finance as well as in crypto. So my kind of area of expertise runs wide.
I think that's a great place to start. And so this is what's fun about this is I believe one of the things we've talked about a few times on this show is how do we bridge the gap? And so I have a background in traditional finance from a technologist standpoint. And so that's part of why I love Web3. And I'm trying to figure out my own methods of how to bridge, working at financial institutions and fintechs into crypto. And I'm curious kind of like what your thoughts are. How do you feel how far we've gotten? And what do you think like an end state would look like? And how good would that or bad would that be for our ecosystems?
So if I go back to 2017, the first time I ever spoke about crypto publicly, I remember talking about how I expected crypto from a regulatory standpoint to kind of follow FX. And the long and the short of that is they tell you don't invest. They tell you lose money. They tell you it's all a scam. And then they regulate it. And then they pick apart what they like and destroy what they don't. And that's kind of what when I say they, let's declassify what that means. Let's define that one. I just mean governments at large, right? So regulatory bodies, legislators, whatever. Now this doesn't necessarily need to be nefarious. Sometimes it's just due to the fact that they're inept. They don't understand the market that they're regulating or trying to defend against, or they think they're defending their people against something that really doesn't exist. Or it could be nefarious, but regardless, this is usually what happens. So I think I made 10 points in 2017 on stage in the UK, and every single one of them came true within about 2 or 3 years. I think in many ways, when I first got the Bitcoin white paper, I was MMS'd the Bitcoin white paper. That's how you know how old crypto is, even though we all still feel like this is new and exciting. It's been around a bit now, right? We're talking about 16 years, basically, since Bitcoin kind of came on the scene. It's been a long time. And so I got an MMS of the Bitcoin white paper. About a year before that, I was involved in an IPO in South America. And I remember we had an investor. Like the hardest thing to get when you're trying to raise money, obviously, is your first investor. And we had somebody within a few days. And it was a pretty big sum of money, at least comparatively speaking of what we were raising. And so, I forget the country the guy was in, but just to make this kind of interesting, let's say he was in Australia and the company was in Colombia, right? And I thought, well, this should be easy. The guy's got the money, he wants to invest. That's the hard part. Yeah, no. I think we ended up with like 4 or 5 different counterparty banks in order to service, because it had to go through a counterparty. That counterparty had to be connected to the exchange where this thing was traded. That counterparty had to have a counterparty in another country that eventually linked us to a counterparty that had Australian dollars and had a local counterparty in Australia. By the time we linked everything, we lost the deal.
Ouch.
And so I thought, well, this could really streamline global commerce in terms of kind of settlement transfer of value. Because, even if it's only 7 transactions a second, if it takes 10 minutes, well, that's a whole lot better than 21 days. And that's what kind of put me down the rabbit hole, and when I read the white paper, and when I look at where we are today, we've accomplished a lot, but most of the reasons where we are today has nothing to do with what the white paper wanted to accomplish or thought it would accomplish, right? But we've accomplished a lot more in other areas that I think are quite exciting, right? Some things that I don't even like I'm not a meme coin fan per se, but I will say that meme coins have proven something, that tokenization is real. Even if it's tokenizing an idea, a meme, whatever you're tokenizing, right? Bringing value to something, a community on the internet, like a Web3 community can bring value to itself without the need for an intermediary, without the need to, I don't create anything except awareness through some type of value that's built on chain is amazing. And, Bitcoin price is what it is, right? We're nearing 100,000. A lot of people thought we'd never get there. We're getting there now. And, you have Bitcoin maximalists that say things like, I don't care about price, which is nonsense, because if Bitcoin was still valued at 4 cents, I wonder what the parties at Bitcoin Miami would have looked like. I don't know. It would have been Dixie cups and, bottles of water.
Probably not a lot there, they couldn't afford it then,
Yeah. Michael Saylor would not be, an influencer in the Bitcoin space if Bitcoin was worth 4 cents. That's for sure. So, the kind of bad side of that is Bitcoin has, Wall Street can say whatever it wants to say, and we can create narratives as to why Wall Street got into Bitcoin. The only reason they got into Bitcoin is because it's the best performing asset in the last 2 decades. And that's the only reason. It's a speculative asset, and they were able to make money off of it. Yeah, the guys that really jumped in and went down the rabbit hole understand about scarcity, and they understand about other elements. But if it was just scarce and it was just decentralized and it was cheaper and didn't have the price valuation that it currently has, you wouldn't see an ETF. That's just plain. Wall Street likes money. Wall Street's greedy, and Wall Street goes after money. So there are some things, I think we've had some missteps, regulatory missteps all over the place. The market itself has had missteps. We've been focusing on the wrong things sometimes collectively, but generally speaking, we've had a lot of progress. And there's a lot more people that have benefited from from crypto and Bitcoin existing, percentages of the populace. And that in and of itself is amazing, I think.
Yeah, and we're here today because of that success, right? And I think not for nothing, one of I've talked about this before, but one of the first projects I worked on, again, coming from the fintech side of the house, was cross-border settlement, right? How could we, doing Western Union, the fees alone just eat you alive. And so imagine you could send your money with no strings attached for pennies on the dollar back to your family that needs it, right? Or to a family member who's sick. Right now, so much of that money goes in fees. And so for me, it's an opportunity there that I still don't feel we've kind of solved, but there you could see the Chases of the world are so invested in this now. And I know they're only doing it because there's a monetary value attached to it. And you either jump on the train or you get left behind. And they're starting to see that, right? You don't need to be a genius to realize, if money's inflowing constantly, the big players want a piece of that. And so I think that's a phenomenal kind of way that we can enhance what was the original intent, right? I view it as if you're a maximalist and I know lots of Bitcoin maxis. I talk to a lot of them, and it's fine. You have your thing. I just wish we could all coexist. And I've always shared this message, whether I like a project or not, I like to support them. Whether it's a meme coin, I don't like the idea of meme coins has always it's like the OTC markets of old. And you're just buying shit sometimes. Pardon my language, but you're just buying that. And sometimes you buy things and you change your area code. You change your zip code. And yeah. I'm
I would also say, that old adage that one man's trash is another man's treasure. Mm-hmm. Is definitely applies to meme coins, right? Because, you can definitely make money in meme coins, just like you can make money by going to the casino, right? And there are people that are really good at that and can do it on a consistent basis. And maybe those aren't gamblers. I don't know. I don't know what you define. A professional gambler, is that even I know that's a term, but does that really make any sense? Kind of an oxymoron. But the reality is that, like you said, regardless of your personal opinion or whether or not you think this particular theme, whatever, is advancing the market, it absolutely is advancing the market because it means more eyes on the market. It means more people. It means more liquidity. And, to the kind of cross-border point, yeah, you would have thought that was kind of a low-hanging fruit, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you thought somebody would have been like, well, this could revolutionize, sending money. I mean, look at how much money gets sent into Mexico. Look how much money gets sent
Mm-hmm.
into the Philippines, Thailand, et cetera, from expats, massive amounts of capital. And yeah, Western Union, I think, has had like 5,000 civil lawsuits over the years and lost
Yep.
every single one. Somehow they're still operational.
I've sued them and won. I mean,
Yeah, I literally got 3 checks in the mail over the course of about 10
mm-hmm.
years I showed up at my mother's house to visit and she's like, oh, I got a check in the mail. I'm like, a check? Really? Like $337 from Western Union for their $27 billion lawsuit that you got, whatever your percentage of. But the thing is that, XRP, which I think bought a piece of MoneyGram or something like that back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. And some of the Stellar and other projects have focused there. The problem with finance in general, you kind of just touched on it. If it's a lot of money, they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a boatload of money, they may not care. If it's astronomical, life-changing for the guy who already has more money than he can spend money, then they wake up and they look, right? And it's amazing how it'll go from, it's like Jamie Dimon, right? I think it's a scam, 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 it's a scam. Oh, now we own, 16 properties within the space. Oh, and by the way, my bank has, a reserve of Bitcoin. And that's finance with everything. That was finance when credit card launched, when checks launched, when, Swift launched. It's always the same thing. And, unfortunately, the people that get into markets first, the guys that have the energy and the young dudes, basically the anarchists that got into crypto are not trying to revolutionize Western Union, right?
No.
They have completely other focuses. They might be looking at it from, they want to make humanity better. They want to decentralize money because centralized money means centralized power, means poverty, means restrictions, means prisons, means, all these things. And that's a way better cause at the end of the day. But for those things that are actual real world problems that a lot of people face that aren't existential problems, they're like everyday problems. Like I have to send $1 and it costs me 80 cents. What can I do? Those things never get tackled first for some reason. No. But, blockchain, to be honest, is like the blueprint for moving value. So that should be, we're getting there though. I think we're pretty close to kind of cracking that nut, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly. And when that happens, there will be a waterfall, like a tidal wave of the next wave of money. I mean, if you think about, we just crossed 3 trillion again. I don't know if that was the first time or if we did that in 2021, but regardless, I think that was 2 trillion we crossed then.
Yep.
We did something as an ecosystem that is starting to make waves across the whole world. And settlement layers, right, are being discussed, and the normal players that do Swift and things like that, they're starting to see the cost benefit, and as soon as they realize they can start cutting costs and they still maintain the security they need, there are CEOs who will just, we're doing this, it's done.
And again, imagine being, another settlement company, any one of many that exist around the world. And then waking up one day to the news that Tether made more money than BlackRock.
They'll wake up real quick.
Yeah. And when you think about that in real terms, if you don't know BlackRock, go down the rabbit hole for a bit. Don't spend too much time because you might get really depressed, but, jump in there a little bit. BlackRock is into everything. Like literally anything you do in your house today, I don't care what it is. You go to the bathroom, you have some toilet paper, you do whatever, you touch anything in your home. BlackRock probably made a little bit of money. A couple cents here and there, everything you did, breathing air there somehow BlackRock just printed some money.
I believe it.
And Tether made a token that represents a fiat currency and put it on a blockchain and then gave it to China for a couple years. That's pretty much, that's it. Right. And now they're making more money than BlackRock. And, if that doesn't wake up the settlement agents around the world, enough that, again, like I said, big money, nobody cares. Bigger money, still don't care. Enough money to wake up a guy that has already enough money. And that's that news. That was coming across Twitter a couple of weeks ago. They're awake.
I think, yeah, no. And I think that's like a perfect segue into, I don't do a lot of Q&A during this, but if I see like a question or somebody that they have a good question, I think this kind of fits into that conversation of where we were, where we're going. And this question was specifically, as an exchange owner, do you find that investors are still interested to show the misleading proof of reserves? And if so, how have you been tackling that hurdle? I think I would maybe rephrase that a little bit of, do you value the proof of reserves? Do you feel that people are still looking for those? And
So,
going forward, is that something you invest in?
so do I value the idea of proof of reserves? So I'll answer it that way. Yes. And then my longer answer as to why the current system isn't there yet. And so, if you've probably heard, if you've been around blockchain enough, you've heard this phrase, garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
And while there are now that we are coming up with systems that's hopefully at one day is actually going to remove that from our, we won't have to say that anymore, but it's still the case. And so with every single a proof of reserve kind of methodology that I've seen, especially for a centralized exchange, there still is an element of trust me, bro. And that
Mm-hmm.
comes from the fact that as a centralized exchange, in order to operate, you have funds at multiple counterparties.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you may have funds at Fireblocks, and obviously you can attest for those, right? They're just sitting there. You can have funds at places like BitGo, other custody agents. You can attest for those. They're just sitting there. But you also probably have LPs. You may have to have accounts at other exchanges or funds, et cetera, where you're holding assets in order to provide collateral so that you can actually keep trading alive on your venue. You may have assets sitting with one counterparty that actually have 10 other counterparties. Now, you don't know this for a fact, because obviously there's really no way to know. It's just like in traditional finance. If I'm putting up collateral with BlackRock, BlackRock may have it with 17 different banks, 15 different
Mm-hmm.
funds, and they're not going to tell me necessarily. I could go look at their, public reports when they have to file them. But this is crypto. Those public reports probably don't exist. Now, we found out how deep the counterparty kind of connections go when, Luna blew up.
Yep.
Or,
Oh, yeah.
when Three Arrows blew up. Everybody's like, oh, Three Arrows? Oh, yeah, we had money with them. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't. CoinMetro didn't. But, I'm sure some of our counterparties did, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's impossible then for me to show all of the assets that we actually hold in our, not necessarily in our custody, but underneath our AUM, right? Underneath
Mm-hmm.
all the assets that have been deposited by end users. It's impossible. And even if I could show those, how do I, how do you know that what I'm showing you is the actual obligations I have back to the end user? Because we're a centralized exchange. We have a centralized ledger, which means in order for me to show obligations, I'm showing you a trust me, bro. I'm showing you that this is what the exchange has. Even if I showed you all deposit and withdrawals ever on certain chains, because of those counterparties, I'm still not going to give you 100%. So there's still going to be an element of trust me, bro. And that's the problem. So the real question then is, as an exchange owner, do I, go to CoinMarketCap or whatever and fill in their little form and publish it and go, yeah, there you go. Or not? Do I spend the time to do that, which is valueless, or do I try and find a solution at some point which has value? And up to this point, we haven't found any single, or even a combination of solutions, I should say, that gives enough information that it's not a majorly trust me, bro situation.
No,
So,
that's great. No, and I, again, background, I can cheat this a little bit. In the traditional finance world, it's very difficult to do these things too. And so it's been interesting. I've seen regulators and stuff talk about this, and interestingly enough, it goes back to trust, right? Do you trust who you're working with? Did people trust FTX? I don't know why you would have. But I get it. I totally get it. I totally get why people were investing their institutions, people, and hopefully, that story ends up as good as it can. But that's kind of where we're at with crypto right now. And what I'd like to see, as we go forward, is there is there a better way to do this? Is it just too much focus on it?
I think that brings up a cool topic, which I've talked about in a lot of closed doors, behind a lot of closed doors, which is that regulators are kind of missing the point about the technology. They obviously are trying to regulate the technology from the standpoint of it carries value, and we want to make sure that the end users are protected because you're transmitting and holding value. But that same technology can actually help regulate the market make the market more transparent, and have actually remove the need for manual regulation, especially, maybe not 100% now, but definitely in the future. And there's very few people that there are organizations, even Ethereum has had a few kind of goes at trying to figure out, whether it's kind of having, information pseudo-anonymously transfer with a smart contract, et cetera, so that, you can maybe trade securities, because this way you don't have to say who you are, but, you have a pseudo-anonymous ID that transfers. But, no one's really put enough effort behind it yet. And I think, in the future, there will be effort put behind that. And the grand reality is that the entire financial system. So normally when you build something new, you obviously take cues from what you built in the past. And the entire financial system is built only on trust. And the way that trust was built is that you would have, gatekeepers. So gatekeepers, usually banks are gatekeepers to the financial ecosystem. The banks kind of figure out who you are. They run checks on where your money's from, whatever. And then once you're in the bank, you're able to, transact within the ecosystem. And that gatekeeper, and it's still very much a trust me bro type situation. But the idea is that the regulator checks, the gatekeeper checks, and the legislation holds everybody in line. All that is a trust me bro scenario, but you kind of have different levels of trust me bro. Yeah. But if you look at anything historically speaking, notaries, anybody know how notaries actually work, and apostles and all those things possible? It's the most ridiculous system in the world. Notaries, like, the man showed up and gave me a document. I don't know if this document is legitimate. I can't check if it's legitimate, but he definitely showed up and signed it in front of me. And then the apostle says, I don't know what anything is here, and I'm not verifying the guy even signed it, but the notary is an actual notary, right? And so everything we built in the past, from the Greeks, the Romans, whatever, all up till now, is based on trust to some extent. And so we've now built an almost trustless ecosystem, and we're trying to catch up from how humans have built everything in the past to how we want to build stuff in the future. And that's not a 16-year process. That's probably a 50 to 100-year process. The real question is as soon as the technology is kind of smart enough to evolve almost to a certain extent on its own, whether that's AI agents, et cetera, that process will speed up. But we have to trust that process as well, right? There's always, there's no such thing as a trustless system. You have to trust the system, right? I mean, so
trust
always an element.
Trust is a lot of, and trust means something different to everybody else. But I think that's a good point, and I do have some more questions about the exchange specifically, and but I do want to touch on that for a second. Of, if you're building a trustless system, are you trusting the people that built that system? It's an interesting kind of mind game you have to play with yourself, and that's the same thing when you look at evaluating, like a CISO will evaluate things, and they're like, this is great, and then you go to risk, and then you start just, it just starts compounding and compounding. You're like, I do trust this, but like, there's a lot of risk even with trust. And so it's just interesting. And what would be interesting for me is, so before I ask, and we get like at the 30-minute mark is like where our peak starts, and we just go up like crazy like there. So
okay,
we're doing good here.
Yeah,
no, this is perfect. And I think the open conversation and just being able to talk about the environment is so good. And one of the things I always like to ask is, are you do you have any kind of care in the world about the POW versus POS conversation?
So I would tackle that. Do I care? Well, I care. I guess care is a definable word here. I think everybody in the space should care about kind of what ends up being considered to be kind of either a default or, kind of the go-to methodology when building out ecosystems, right? Because if one wins, then the majority of new systems that are built will be built copying whatever wins. And so you'll be stuck with whatever limitations that system may have. Maybe not necessarily stuck, because there's still maybe others in the background, but there'll be, there's usually, when there's a winner somewhere, especially in technology, the winner at first, it's hard to see who the winner is. But as soon as there is a winner, it's just gone, right? Like everybody else is so small in terms of market share, forget it, right? To catch up is not impossible, but it's difficult, right? So, proof of work in many ways, I would say, is optimal than proof of stake. And so, whether we're talking about security, which is probably one of the biggest reasons why proof of work is better in terms of how it operates. Now, the problem with technology as well is that at the end of the day, you can always optimize something. There is a point where optimization, your optimizations get less and less. You can still always optimize, right? But they're just, you're not making the biggest dent in the world as you continue to optimize. If I look at where the liquidity is, well, liquidity is on Bitcoin. Does it have anything to do with it being proof of work? You could argue. You could argue yes or no. And I think there's good arguments, maybe even on both sides of that question. But is there a reason why it was proof of work? Was there a reason why there wasn't some other type of methodology that was chosen? And why was that chosen, right? Again, security probably being one of the main factors here. And when it comes to scalability and things like that, obviously Kadena has figured out a way to make proof of work scalable. Other chains have figured out other ways to potentially make proof of work scalable. So I guess, from being here since the beginning, basically, I'm more on the proof of work side. Proof of stake is interesting for some other reasons. I mean, obviously this idea of kind of, having a stake and being able to kind of have a stake. But at the end of the day, having that stake, there's not much of a difference between owning a stake in something that's proof of work from a high level than owning it because it's proof of stake, right? Still, whoever owns more controls more. And and there were arguments made in the past that proof of stake was more probably fair, but I don't really buy those arguments.
I think Ethereum's been grappling with that for a while because there's a negative connotation that these whales control the POS market. And I don't think that's debatable. I think that's normal. I mean, look at who's the biggest investor in pick a company, a traditional company. They control the market. If they sell, price tanks. If they hold enough shares,
you're never going to get away from humans, right? So, maybe one day there'll be no humans left. We'll be brains and, I don't know, some AI somewhere. I have no idea. But even then, I guess we'll have some human traits. But, humans are really good at some stuff and we're really bad at others. But while some humans can't recognize a pattern to save their lives, our brains are made to not only create them, but recognize patterns. And that's why we're so cyclical, right? That's why crypto markets are cyclical. You can talk about, you could say it's astrology. I've heard people make so many arguments about this. It's got nothing to do with it. As soon as somebody tells you there's 4-year cycles 1,000 times, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When enough people understand that. And you can tie that into elections. There's a lot of things you can tie it into, but still, we're cyclical because we're just pattern beings. And because of that, that it generally, when we do anything, we stick to a pattern, and those patterns can be good or bad.
Oh yeah. And the word confirmation bias, unfortunately, plays into this too. And I was thinking even like as shareholders, like as majority shareholders, right? You could have a board that gets to decide everything. Like you could vote, but your vote doesn't really tackle the percent that they own, right? And so I think about like the Ethereum Foundation and things like that. They start to lose and wheedle out control a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm not positive or negative on it. I think that's going to be a big story to evaluate in a few years from now when they've really, if they can catch up and start to make some inroads at Bitcoin again, because they were getting there, and then the gap is just boom, it's booming again.
I mean, if you look at cycles, this cycle so far it hasn't played out, right? But this cycle would be primed for ETH to pick up market share. Whether it does that or not, there's so many things that tie into that. But in terms of kind of, I don't know of a system that humans have created that would allow for something to be fair, not based on ownership, right? So imagine having, you can own as much as you want, but these two guys still have control, even though they own less than you do. Or, the flip side of that, you own a ton, but we're not, you don't have control, but, buy more, please. Buy more of this company, but, you have no say, but continue to funnel your money into it, even if you don't agree with everything they do, but you're never going to have a say in how it can change. I don't, again, human nature. I don't see that happening. So it's very difficult to come up with a system that isn't based on you own more, you have more power. Whether that be proof of work or proof of stake, whether that be the 51% attack scenario on proof of work, or whether it be I own 80% of this of all tokens in existence. So obviously on the proof of stake side, I can vote anything, and I can just be voting all over the place, and no one can stop me.
Yep.
Anytime you add a rule in there that stops them, one, you're kind of getting away from the whole aspect of being decentralized, right? But even allowing someone to own that much would not really be decentralized. So, at the end of the day, it's and then the herd rule, you could do the herd rule where you don't let anybody buy more than, I don't know, one token. Then you have 9 billion people making vote,
Yep.
8 billion people trying to make a vote on something. You don't do anything because no one can
That is
agree on that.
interesting. Yeah, no, you'll never get consensus. And we see that with DAOs and things like that too, of like the idea is great. But if you need to check in every 48 hours and actually vote on something, it's difficult when you don't know the group. If you're just all anonymous on chain, I mean, those things become very difficult. But I think this is like a great time. I don't know how much you know about Coin Metro, but I have been using it since Gate.io cut me off as a U.S. citizen. And so it's been a few years. My company uses it, and one of the things I wanted to ask is like, kind of bringing all this back together. I had a question. I don't have a lot of questions that I write down. I had one that I wrote down, and I wanted to ask it, but not in like a boring kind of way. Like, how is Coin Metro different? And I think you could evaluate that in the sea of exchanges. And I'm curious. Like what makes you guys different, and I want you to answer it kind of as like a secondary answer, so you can riff on this as much as you want, from a business targeting business versus like a B2C to B2B kind of channel for you guys. What does that mean for you, like now, long term, and what kind of strategies have you done over time to kind of differentiate yourself? I know that's a lot, but I'd like kind of like a full answer on that.
Sure. So I'll start with the differentiating factors. Obviously, we're a fintech, so we are almost constantly raising money. Maybe not constantly, but that's just part of the game. So, I get asked this a lot, and depending on who I'm talking to, the answer can resonate or not. And generally speaking, the whole reason that I started Coin Metro, or even before that, my FX brand, was because I was trading. I was trading in FX. I felt I wasn't getting the appropriate level of support or access no matter where I went. Okay, I didn't have the biggest account in the world, but it wasn't a retail account by any stretch of the imagination in terms of size. And still, I never got answers to questions. I got macro responses. I couldn't get in touch with anybody, no matter what broker I would go to. And the bigger brokers that would handle, let's say, more institutional accounts, for whatever reason, either I was in a state, this time I was in the US at the time, or I was in a country, whatever, that I couldn't open an account in, or, whatever. There was a myriad of, or they simply didn't accept accounts from retail traders, regardless of the size, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was stuck with a conundrum. So that led me down the path to open a brokerage. And it's the same reason when I transitioned into crypto that I wanted to kind of do the same thing. And that's about, it's easy to say, great customer support. And most people, well, not most people, many people will kind of shrug and go, yeah, well, I've only contacted support where I am twice, where I'm like, well, how'd that go? Well, terrible, whatever. Have you ever had an issue where you got locked out of your account? You thought you might be hacked. There was something wrong with your balance, and then somebody goes, yeah. And what happened? Oh man, nightmare. It took 3.5 months. They locked my account. My account was closed for no reason. I couldn't get in touch with anybody. I had to like Google an email address from, who knows where. And then that person didn't even respond. Didn't work there anymore, whatever. So, from all financial institutions I've ever dealt with, I could count on half a hand how many times I like hung up a phone or said, wow, that person actually went out of their way to try and solve my issue. Whether I had a big account, small account, whatever, not even had an account yet, was trying to open an account. And this guy went out of his way, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. And, I'm approaching 50, right? So, I've been around a while. Not many times that's happened. And so I would say core differentiator number 1 is client support. That doesn't mean everybody has a great time when they come and talk to us, right? I mean, there's always going to be those cases we can't help out or whatever, and that happens. But generally speaking, I think it's the best support in the industry. And we put a lot of effort to make sure that's the case. On the other side of that, I think, we talk about proof of funds, and a broader topic about that is just transparency in general, being open. Running a business inside of a community, I got to tell you, is rough.
Yes.
I had hair in 2017, and a pretty decent amount of it, and I don't anymore. And I don't know if that would have happened if Coin Metro wasn't around, but I tend to think I'd still be sporting. I would have actually had to comb my hair before the show if I was, I don't know, running a bakery or something.
Before before the show, I Kevin had asked if this was on video or audio, and he made a joke that he needed to comb his hair first, and I think it's so telling of yeah exactly yeah. I had to shave a little bit, right? Otherwise, I had like this crazy beard. But I can attest to that. Like my hair's gotten it looks black because I like block all the gray and you can't really see it on here. But like I've aged so many years in crypto since I've been here, and it is interesting. The communities do make or break you, and a lot of times, even when they're making you, they're breaking you at the same time. But it's just a
Yeah,
physical,
it's
emotional drain.
it's an amazing experience, and I even if I were to do it again, I would change things obviously now knowing what I did wrong, but I would still go the community route.
Hmm.
It's amazing for many reasons. It's interesting. It gives you a lot of data and just kind of feedback you'd never get otherwise. But no matter what you do, somebody's not going to like it.
Hmm.
And no matter how great someone thinks you are, the kind of the I don't know opposite doppelganger of that person exists that just absolutely hates you and everything you do. And and over time, that the latter are the ones that are the most vocal, right? So,
Hmm.
you got a good day at work, you just crushed a meeting. I don't know, you just got a ticket on your in your fundraising round. You're feeling good about yourself. Then you go to Telegram, and you need to like I don't know sip some tea and go sit in a corner and stare at a wall for a few minutes, or whatever to kind of take a few breaths. So it's difficult, and it
Hmm.
doesn't. But it's to me, it's kind of like I there's no gain without some pain, and there's
Hmm.
sometimes there's a lot of pain in doing this. It's like being in a reality show 24/7, and no matter what you do, somebody's there analyzing it. The old armchair
Hmm.
quarterback, and sometimes they're spot on, man, but it still hurts. So yeah, client support I think is a big one. Transparency and just kind of the way we kind of run the business I think is another. I think we're the only aside from Binance tokenized crypto exchange, centralized crypto exchange that ICO'd sometime in 2017 that still exists.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we're not Binance, right? They did a lot of stuff I would have never done that led to this to a lot of success, right? They kind of bent a lot of rules. Maybe the rules
Hmm.
didn't even exist at the time, but just was outside of my modus operandi that I wouldn't do. But the writing was on the wall. Finance generally, well, big business works this way.
Hmm.
Sometimes everybody that breaks all the rules ends up having all the success. I don't that happens. But I think in the end of the day, we are a much different company. We support our clients in a much different way. We're very curated when it comes to listings. Yeah, we do list things because people ask for them, etc. But we really do try to put in effort to find things that we feel will do well. We don't want to have clients that come and have to go through 5,000 listings, the 27,000 meme coins to figure out which ones they may want to put, their hard-earned money into. So we try to humanize the market as best we can. I've had, if I think about customer feedback on and off ramp, I've gotten a lot of feedback over the years that we're the best in the business. Whether it be euros, whether it be pounds, dollars, which will soon be back as well.
I wanted to
Um,
ask about that. I was just waiting for the right time. The off ramp is what I have to like send to another source to
yep.
myself personally so I can off ramp on Coinbase. It's an interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
You mentioned FTX. So FTX got hit, and then pretty much everybody else got hit by Three Arrows, et cetera. And that led to Signature Bank getting shut down by the U.S. Regulator. It
yep.
led to what is it? Prime Trust, which is one of the biggest ACH
Mhm.
providers that were servicing crypto, going bankrupt. Led to a lot of things, and that led to much stricter rules and controls over ACH specifically in the U.S. And so we get a lot of flack for this. People think, people generally think in the world that, I don't know, Kevin just makes a phone call to like 3 or 4 banks and somebody's like, "Hey, Kev, what's going on?" "Oh yeah, USD. Yeah, no problem. Here's an
Yeah.
account and, have at it." Yeah,
Mhm.
no, doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, the way it does work now is there's been so many, hopefully with the new administration in the US, I do
Yep.
think that we're going to see this back up a little bit, probably back to like 2021 heyday when it came to maybe 2022, 2021, something like that. Banking, when it was just easier, wasn't easy, but it was easier in terms of connecting accounts. But they put a lot of hurdles, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
technology hurdles, which are the thing that slowed us down the most, because it requires us to basically retool our entire back end on how
Mhm.
we were how the money flow looks, from client to the bank to us, or bank to the client, basically a client account. Then when the client makes a transaction, that money flows into account. We can actually move the funds, whether it's got to go to a liquidity provider, to a custody agent, whatever. All that stuff has to be retooled. And it's not just tech, it's about planning, it's about risk, it's about understanding the counterparties we now have to work with, we didn't have to work with in the past, whether the technology counterparties or otherwise. Anyway, so it took a long time. Then, funny enough, we went through that process with a provider. This was sometime at the beginning of this year, maybe end of
Mhm.
last year. We got all the way through the process. We integrated. We were about 2 weeks away from finishing the front end, and that provider lost their banking partner.
Ouch.
And all that work went out the drain. And now we're
That's a
back.
very common story in our industry. Unfortunately,
And
it's
so, yeah,
yeah.
it's a minefield, And I get, just today I was having a conversation in a Telegram group when talking about kind of, I've heard so many people tell me over the years, not in crypto really, but also here, like, um, if I had, I would have, whatever. It's
Mhm. Yep.
the classic armchair quarterback, but also kind of things like, I would have done this differently. Or even when they ask me, like, oh, if you know now, if you know now, if you knew then what you know now, would you have made different decisions? And my answer to that is always, well, no, because I can't know now I
Yep.
mean, the question is ridiculous, because I knew everything I knew then, and I made a decision based on what I knew then.
Yep.
If I knew now, well, what scenario does that ever happen, right? So this question is kind of a loaded question, because unless you have a time machine, which unfortunately I don't. If you do have
Mhm.
one, though, please DM me, because I'd love to have that.
I don't, unfortunately.
But
But no.
it's difficult, right? So you combine that anyway. Getting kind of every move you make seen live by a community is rough, man. It's like running around naked all day with a camera on you. You don't know where to hide
Mhm.
sometimes. But anyway, I wouldn't change it. I don't think, to be honest. I think it keeps us on our toes and pushes us to be better, which is at the end of the day what everybody wants, I guess.
So there will be at some point here another option, and I agree from a regulatory standpoint. If as long as we get clarity, I think that's where a lot of the traditional finance companies have to be so careful with the FDIC and the OCC. They don't want to get slammed. They don't want to get slammed by the SEC if they're public. It's just so many things that they have to contend with. Where even if they make money off of it, you can just get yourself in so much trouble. And so, is that then there's other people you're looking at then evaluating? Is that what I understood? Like to be able to provide USD off ramp again?
So right now we have USD Swift lined up, and we're a few weeks away from launching that. ACH is
Awesome.
still something that needs to be worked out on the back end, and so that's probably a Q1 endeavor. But
Okay.
USD Swift, including from US as well, etc., with relatively low rates, obviously not the same as domestic wire, but close, should be launched before the end of the year.
Perfect. No, that's good. That's good. And look, the timelines in crypto, people don't get it. Like there are so many factors outside of crypto that can play into these timelines. But that's good to know because I have a vested interest in that working so that I can do our legitimate business through CoinMetro and not have to bounce between Binance and others. And there's not look, we do what we have to. Not all tokens are in one place, and that actually is what I want to talk about now. So I kind of brought it up at the beginning. The token generator is something we created for the Kadena ecosystem. I know other ecosystems have them. With our 20 chain architecture, deploying a token is more challenging, and I think that should be recognized. And so, from a Coin Metro standpoint, I mean, how is there? I've talked to many exchanges, by the way. It seems to be a very similar story. Either there's a lot of money involved, or we don't support Kadena XYZ because we just don't support them. And so, I'm curious: is that something that you can speak to? We've got a couple tokens that have been dying to get on an exchange. But I feel like for us as a small community, and maybe you could talk about this in broad strokes too, us as a small community have had a lot of trouble lining up an exchange that would actually take us on. I'm curious, kind of your open thoughts on that, and I'd like to expand on it a little more.
I don't know if you or any of your listeners saw Arthur Hayes's blog posts a couple weeks ago, I think maybe a month ago, maybe slightly more than that, about like Binance listing fees,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of shedding a bit of light onto what for most people in the industry is a mystery, right? Because they just,
Mm-hmm.
and that led to a Twitter thread about Coinbase listing fees. I think Brian Armstrong coming out and said they
Mm-hmm.
don't charge listing fees, and someone saying, "Well, you asked me for 48 million, or whatever, some ridiculous number."
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, a lot of the bigger properties ask for percentages of token mints, or they ask for massive amounts of what they consider to be a deposit. But at the end of the day, even then, they ask for large amounts of money to get listed, etc. Now, an exchange is a business; it obviously needs
Mm-hmm.
to make money. And those fees are generally, I guess, coordinated or correlated, I should say, to the size of the venue you're trying to list on, right? Same thing if you go to list on NASDAQ versus, I don't know, A Milan, you're going to pay a different fee. I guess that's normal. But some of these fees are just ridiculous, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there are also a lot of times other requirements, like you need to be listed on 2 or 3 other venues, you need to have this much in volume, and that pushes projects to then do things that they otherwise wouldn't, like pay a market maker for volume, which is just there so something looks pretty.
Mm-hmm.
And we all saw what happened with that with the SEC just recently when
Yeah.
they hit finally. I mean, it took a long time for that to happen, but finally, the SEC finally probably thrown out a lawsuit that may actually make sense. I mean, I don't, I read through the charging documents. Whether or not all those things are true, we'll find out, I guess, during trial. But at least it's something that kind of makes sense. We all have talked about for years about how volume is not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
real within crypto, at least not 100%. So anyway, all these things together, we've over the course of our existence, we haven't charged listing fees. We've listed a lot of projects for nothing. Now we do have, I would say, I don't say it would be a listing fee, but we do charge a bit of money, and that money is usually tied to marketing efforts that we're going to do, like co-marketing efforts,
Mm-hmm.
things that we're going to do in terms of tech that we have to, integrate, et cetera. If we have to integrate, if we don't have to integrate, we charge less, et cetera, et cetera.
Makes sense.
We don't charge a massive percentage. We don't charge a massive fee either. In comparison to even platforms like MEXC, it is a small percentage of what they charge as an upfront fee. Our goal really is to get projects, like I say, for the most part, curated projects that we think will do well. Now, to the question of the token generator, I've been for a while now, seeing things like, what's it called? Pump Fun or whatever it's called.
Yeah. 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 Yep.
First time I was introduced to that, I took a look and, I thought this is fun. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had a look and I was like, well, this is, there's, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands at that point, meme coins that have popped up on Solana. For the chain itself, it's great because at the end of the day, it means, TVL is rising. So that's cool for them. And it'd be cool for Kadena as well in that instance. So, I started thinking about, well, what is CoinMetro's future, right? I'm not a big meme coin fan personally. I've
Mm-hmm.
talked about that already. But in terms of showing, I'm a big fan of community. I'm a big fan of creating value. I'm a big fan of allowing communities, projects, businesses to be able to create value that they sell for fair value in order to promote their business, bring in capital, etc. And when I think of it from that angle, that's essentially what a meme coin is. Okay, it's not a business. Maybe it might turn into one. But what it is it's a community trying to place value behind their community, and that may be through, the depiction of a meme. So the business side of my brain, at least, had started thinking about this already and didn't know this was really going to be a topic. To be honest, I didn't even know of the existence of one on Kadena. We've talked about in the past about listing Kadena projects because we were, I think, the first and for a while the only exchange that had written to all 20 chains. And we had problems in the past because when people started picking up Kadena and when other exchanges, people were sending to chains that didn't, that they hadn't written to, and like, oh, your funds are lost. And we had to actually help people recover funds that were sent to quote unquote the wrong chain. And that lasted for well over a year. And so I guess the end result of that is I'm open to discussing how we could assist the Kadena community in bringing in TLV. So bring
Hmm.
yeah, total TLV,
Hmm.
total luck value. How to increase that, and also how to provide, yeah, a place for people in these communities to be able to trade those assets.
Hmm.
Would there potentially be some limitations, or I don't know. From a regulatory
Hmm.
standpoint, I honestly think even under things like MiCA, I'm not sure meme coins are generally an issue,
Hmm.
um, especially if the generator creates them using the algorithm is very clear and specific, and
Hmm.
so we're not adding in utility functionality that may end up being viewed as a security. So I guess, yeah, I'm open to it. I think it would be an interesting conversation, and I'm open to exploring potentially even having some type of automatic bridge at some point where you can launch a token. As soon as it reaches a certain amount of TLV, it's automatically launched. We have market maker support, so we could talk to market
Hmm.
makers that they can automatically start to, build a book with actual liquidity around that asset as soon as it hits a certain amount of locked value. So yeah, I think it's interesting, and the way the market's going, I don't see this type of activity necessarily going away unless regulation starts to cripple it. But right now, I don't see that on the horizon, at least, especially not in the U.S. At
Hmm.
least for the next foreseeable future.
I think that's great, and I understand. So when I asked it, I knew I kind of had an idea, right? I have talked to a lot of exchanges, and the MEXC one's an interesting one, right? And they've changed their model recently, and I know they're trying to attract people, but I'm almost wondering if it makes sense. And we've got a smaller community than we did in 2021, right? But we're we're trying. We're trying to increase TVL on chain. We're trying to TLV makes sense too, and trying to give a place for us to be successful. And I feel like because of maybe what's happened in the past, because we haven't hit that stride, it's very difficult for these projects to even want to launch here. And so if we had somebody, and I'm not saying to partner with, but essentially to partner with, if we as a community, as Kadena, had somewhere to just funnel people, right? I think what you would see, right, the benefit is you would have that tighter knit community that wants to actually be there, that will use your exchange for other things. And we will see, like everybody, we will see growth as the markets turn up for altcoins and things like that.
Yeah,
We'll see it, whether we do things right or not. It'll happen. And so,
I think at the end of the day, a token generator, there are assets with their own mainnets that
mhm,
really
yes.
what they do is generate tokens, right?
Mhm.
At the end of, I said from 2017, I still remain kind of by what I said, in that one of the biggest things that crypto will bring us is tokenization,
Mhm.
because it allows to kind of create value uh, in places where it was almost impossible to create previously. And it unlocks liquidity because of that. And, financial professionals, just like they didn't look at the broader crypto markets as liquidity, let's say even a couple of years ago, 6 months ago, some of them, but definitely not years ago. They're absolutely not looking at meme coins in that light right now.
Mm-mm.
But if you think about the amount of total value locked in meme coins and where that value comes from, that for the most part, yes, there are VCs, both small and large, that have started to pump and dump meme coins. That happens, right? And that's
Mhm.
just the nature of the beast. But the vast majority of that liquidity comes from retail, and comes from a retail market that will not be putting money in this cycle or next or the one after, probably, in assets like Bitcoin, because they feel it's too expensive now, and they don't necessarily understand the math that if it goes up 100%, you put in $1, you're still getting 100% of a return. It's just too expensive now, so they look for lower priced assets, and that's not going to change. It's almost like either your first step in is going to be through something like a meme coin because your taxi driver tells you about it, your mother, your father, your uncle, whatever, your brother, or it's once you master how these markets work, you end up in meme coins because you're able to make money on them. So you put some discretionary money in the meme coin, 10%,
Mhm.
5%, 2% of your portfolio, and you're discretionary, having fun, but also trying to make a bit of money. And there's a ton of liquidity there. And if regulation was geared towards not making markets smaller on the idea that that will actually protect the end user, but actually making markets more liquid in the idea that that will protect the end user, we would have a completely different market right now. In fact, a lot of the money that's flowing into Bitcoin right now might actually be in meme coins. The fact that it goes into Bitcoin is because, you know, the powers that be have created a narrative that empowers Bitcoin and pulls power away from the rest of the market. I'm not saying that's a bad thing in general, but that's where we are, right? So I think if you have a token generation system and you have a backbone that can scale, then you have the ability to go from meme coins into tokenization of debt, tokenization of equity, tokenization of lots of different things, RWA, like everybody says now, real world assets. And that's powerful. And it doesn't really matter where you start.
No,
you know,
no.
So yeah, I think it goes really well with a broader vision that I have, or that CoinMetro has, in terms of what this market's going to look like 5, 10, 20 years from now. And, you know, I've liked to support KDA since the beginning. We supported them on their original bonding program.
Yep.
And that was really good for us, and also really good for the Kadena community.
Very popular.
And so, you know, being able to support something, whether directly or indirectly, that supports the underlying ecosystem, you know, I think everybody benefits. And I just, you know, I know you didn't post it, but I saw something pop up like, yeah, what about, you know, rug pulls? Would that make, you know, CoinMetro look bad? You know, to be honest, no matter how well we curate things, some things will always fail. You know, that's the nature of the beast. I love hearing this around town, you know, when Bitcoin's at an all-time high, and I'm sure you've seen this headline, 100% of wallets are in profit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, actually, that is a lie. It's a bold-faced, ridiculous lie, because one, you have wallets that had Bitcoin and no longer have it, and you also have wallets that have a mix of Bitcoin they bought now, Bitcoin they bought earlier, etc. Bitcoin that they bought and sold earlier for a loss. So no, in fact, if you really dig in, the amount of people that are in profit in Bitcoin in terms of numbers is not going to be any different than the amount of people that are generally in profit in any market. And it's going to be 30% or less of the general retail populace that remain in profit. And many times it's much less. And so, you know, we're never going to pick all winners. And I think at some point, as long as people are aware what they're, look, we could even have a different market book for the generated tokens, the KDA, like, you know, the Kadena ecosystem kind of a book. And that book is just a cones that constantly are just popping in and out. And people understand what they're getting into. There's, you know, disclaimers and all that good stuff we need to do for regulatory purposes. But if it helps bring liquidity, it helps everybody, regardless if you're in that asset or not.
I think that would be, you know, I didn't think about it that way, but even something like that. And the interesting thing is, from a token generation standpoint, we can control the inputs and outputs. So if we needed to do something that fit that model, one of the things we added to that was that we put their data in the contracts, right? And so Pax unique, right? And that allows us to do some things that are more challenging on other chains. And so we can write things like their images, their socials, all those types of things right into their contracts and make them very easy to read. And what would be interesting about something like that is, I didn't think about it that way, but we're kind of doing that with one of our dexes, where you can just basically automatically get added. And that automation, when that's done, wouldn't be too dissimilar from, you know, how somebody like CoinMetro could support that. So I think for me, instead of dwelling on this, and what would be interesting is, I'm always like, what can we do to like solve this? And so I'm happy on behalf of our community to kind of take some charge on this one and bring the right people into that conversation. So if there's somebody that we could kind of talk to and kind of write up what this would look like, and look, fees and stuff, we could discuss all that too. But I think what would make sense is, we don't talk about listing one project. I'm ecosystem. Whether I have 20 projects or not is irrelevant. I support our whole ecosystem. And so for me, kind of like a huge win for me would be to enhance our offering. And so I think it would be great to continue this conversation with the right people. And
absolutely. I think it makes sense. And I just see people post, TLV, TVL.
Yeah.
Look, total value lock, total lock value.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if there is a default on that one, to be honest. I don't know. There probably is, but I think it means the same. I don't know.
All money burns the same when you light it on fire. So, you know, It doesn't matter.
Value lock and lock value. I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah. So we're right at the top of the hour. I will just want to say thank you, Kevin, for coming on our show. I did want to say one thing, and then I'll let you have the stage. Next week we will have the Chips team on here. They're launching a new project, and so we're going to get them on here to kind of talk about that and explain. There's a lot of questions that I think will be very helpful for people. And if you have questions, this is a good one to be a little more interactive because they are part of the community. So again, thank you everybody for joining today. This was our most viewed concurrently, so thank you, Kevin, for that. And I'd like you to be able to share anything you kind of want to close with.
yeah, just thank you, Amir, for the invite. This was fun. Thanks for the questions. Appreciate it. Thanks for the support from both the Kadena community and our own community over the years. Really do appreciate it. And yeah, never fear to come to our community and gripe about something, or you can give praise too. That's always
Yeah,
nice to see sometimes in the morning with a coffee. But if you want to gripe, have at it. You can find me at Kevin Mirko. So there's a lot of fake Kevins, so watch out.
yeah.
But at Kevin Mirko, no space, obviously, on pretty much every platform, and at Coin Metro as well on basically every platform. But yeah, thanks again. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully we can continue that conversation kind of offline, and maybe over the next coming months have some really cool news to share with the community again.
Yeah, I'll steamroll into that one just to make sure that I'd put that on me. So I'd be very curious to see how that comes out. And I think that was a big one for everybody, and I left it at the end on purpose. So thank you again, Kevin. Thank you everybody for joining. We'll be back again next week. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.